Oh man, I was just standing over there.
Dangerously cold weather continues to sweep across the country. A barrage of winter storms dumping snow and frozen rain out west, while those of us in the Northeast gear up for a second Arctic blast that could come as early as tomorrow. Hello, I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. NBC News has confirmed at least 16 weather-related deaths in 7 states. Right now, the Pacific Northwest is bearing the brunt of things. Thousands of power outages were reported across California, Oregon, and Washington. It's also creating very slippery conditions, making it tough for people to get around. Take a look at how a reporter from our NBC affiliate in Portland literally slid around a sidewalk.
Over here is where the problems are. I'm having problems standing. It's because everything is so slippery and it's just absolute ice.
Back here on the East Coast, millions of people are rushing to dig themselves out of piles of snow before that storm out on the West Coast makes its way across the country. But some cities are already getting a taste of what's to come. The National Weather Service says a lake effect event has dropped some 60 inches of snow in South Buffalo, New York. Things were so bad there today, officials issued a driving ban for parts of that area. Meanwhile, the southern part of the country is not immune to this weather. Nashville, Tennessee saw more than 6 inches of snow this week, with temperatures as low as -13, the coldest weather there in decades. We have a team covering the latest conditions tonight. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman is standing by in studio. But first, let's go to NBC News correspondent Kathy Park, joining us from Knoxville, Tennessee. Kathy, 6 of those confirmed deaths due to the weather are in your state, Tennessee. There's currently a state of emergency across Tennessee. What can you tell us about conditions there, and why has this storm been so dangerous in the state of Tennessee?
Are we okay? No, isn't it?
Yeah, Ellison, when you look around, you can clearly see here in Knoxville specifically, we have gotten a lot of snow. And this is something that you don't typically see, especially in this part of the country. At last check, we got about 8 inches of snow. And typically this time of year during the entire winter season, on average, it's about 4 inches. So we got a lot of snow in a short amount of time, caught a lot of people off guard. And then adding insult to injury, we are dealing with some bone chilling temperatures. We are in the teens right now. It will likely dip into the single digits. So all the snow, there is no thawing or melting going on. It'll likely ice over. So black ice will definitely be a big concern. But as you mentioned, there were several deaths reported across the state of Tennessee. 6 confirmed deaths so far. We're still getting more information as to how those people died. But we learned that one man was actually on top of his roof clearing off the snow when he fell. And so these are some of the stories that we're hearing. But obviously treacherous conditions out there. Crews are working around the clock, but a lot of these secondary roads are still extremely icy.
So, Kathy, what are officials there doing to help now and prepare in the coming days?
So there is another system that is making its way here. It's supposed to come in tomorrow night into Friday morning. Fortunately, it won't be as intense, not like what we saw earlier this week. It's supposed to be a wintry mix. We could probably see about a ½ inch of precipitation, but already a lot of students here do not have classes. Schools are closed for the rest of the week. A lot of workers are encouraged to work remotely. But as you can imagine, Allison, a lot of people are hunkered down at home. So officials are encouraging people to conserve their energy because the power grid is also experiencing some strain as well.
Kathy, when you are talking to people there, what are they saying about this weather? I mean, it is a record. This is not normal for Tennessee.
Yeah, it's certainly not normal. And folks that I spoke with throughout the day today, it kind of caught them off guard. They were thinking maybe a couple of inches, but not 8 inches of snow. But they're pretty much taking it in stride. As I mentioned, a lot of kids are out of school, adults as well. They're taking the week off because of the conditions. So earlier today, here's how they're reacting to all this snow in the area. Take a listen.
This is a first for me that I can remember of. So.
And is this manageable? I mean, we got, I think, around 8 inches of snow.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's a good time. It does affect work, unfortunately, but you got to have fun.
And Ellison, don't expect the snow to go anywhere for quite some time. When I looked at the forecast, it looks like we'll be in these frigid temperatures at least through the weekend. Finally, on Monday is when we'll kind of get into the 40s, and then we'll be watching a big swing in the temperatures. But of course, overnight, we'll be dealing with more icing on the ground, black ice. So extreme caution is kind of the word here in Tennessee and throughout the South.
All right,
Ellison?
Kathy Park in Tennessee, thank you. NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman is in studio with us, so she's talking about some of the predictions for the next 24 hours. What are you seeing? What should people be preparing for?
They're going to prepare for more snow. We're looking at a powerful storm system out west. This is our next cross-country storm. What Kathy is talking about is another storm system that's emerging out of the southeast. I'll show you that because they're going to kind of phase together. But right now, we're looking at 40 million people impacted by winter alerts. We have winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, winter storm warnings, and also ice storm warnings in the Pacific Northwest. We've had a mess all day, really treacherous roadways with ice and also snow falling in feet. So as we zoom in a little closer on radar, you can see the green, the reds, the oranges. That's where we're seeing the heavy rain falling. And then as we go into the interior portions, you see a little pink and purple. That's where the ice is falling. We're seeing power lines down, power outages, and lots of blue here. That's where the snow is falling. So portions of the Cascades into the Northern Rockies seeing feet of snow. This is all going to move cross country. So for the rest of tonight, we're looking at rain, wind, and ice causing lots of problems. Then heavy snow for the Cascades, the Northern Rockies. It's going to continue into the Central Plains. So once again, another Arctic blast into the Central Plains. We're going to see snow. That's where you're seeing the blue. And what Kathy was talking about is another storm system emerging out of the southeast. These two are going to come together. They're going to join forces to bring some snow into the northeast once again. It's going to feel a lot like it did on Monday. So we didn't get a whole lot of snow, 1 to 4 inches in some spots, but it slowed us down. And that's what we're going to see once again. Terrible timing for the storm. It's going to impact the morning commute into the evening commute. So it's an all-day thing, probably canceling storms school once again. So there's all that blue, that light snow from the Midwest to the mid-Atlantic. And then on the warm side, we're going to see showers and storms crossing the southeast, just like what we saw on Monday. We even had a tornado touchdown in portions of Florida on Monday. So as we go throughout the forecast here, we're looking at lots of rain along the west coast of into the Pacific Northwest with those brighter colors. We're looking at ice. That's going to bring treacherous travel once again through Friday. So it's not just today, it's not just tomorrow, it's into Friday as well. And lots of snow. You see these pinks and purples. That's where we're seeing the highest amounts of snowfall in the Cascades and also the Rockies. As we move cross country, as the storm moves cross country, we're looking at lots of snow into the northeast and some parts along the Appalachians here where you see that pink into the northeast, portions of New England, 1 to 4 inches generally. And along the Great Lakes, we're looking at feet of snow also. So this is a little different. We have that wind coming over those warm lakes, and we're looking at snow in feet there, 1 to 3 feet. Wind chill alerts, lots of them, 12 million people impacted by wind chills. Ellison?
Michelle Grossman, thank you.
Sure.
The Republican presidential race now moves to New Hampshire, meaning we're just 6 days away from that state's primary election. And things already seem to be heating up. Donald Trump and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley are taking aim at each other, perhaps because Haley is polling better in New Hampshire against Trump than she did in Iowa. A new poll shows Haley losing ground behind Trump with registered Republicans, but leading with the state's independents. Trump, however, is not resting on his Iowa laurels. For the second time in as many days, the former president has traveled from a defamation trial in New York to New Hampshire to hold a political rally. In fact, one is underway right now. Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis left New Hampshire today after his events there this afternoon, appearing to sidestep New Hampshire to focus his campaign efforts on South Carolina. For more, let's bring in NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent and often campaign trail warrior, Garrett Haake. He joins us from New Hampshire. So, Garrett, Nikki Haley's campaign, they released a series of attack ads in New Hampshire today going after former President Donald Trump. What do you make of those? Do you think we are starting to see a shift in strategy here?
Well, it's a shift in strategy, but it's also just a shift in the dynamics of this race. I mean, Nikki Haley has made it very clear over the last couple of weeks that she wanted this. She wanted New Hampshire specifically to be a one-on-one contest. She didn't get it. Ron DeSantis is still in this race, but she's going to do everything she can to elevate her profile as the alternative to Donald Trump and to try to push back on what's been a pretty aggressive on-air campaign by his campaign to define her. Now she has the resources to do it and the opportunity to do it in New Hampshire, which is basically one media market state, and you're seeing her put some money on the air to try to do exactly that.
So, Garrett, at the same time all of this is happening, we've got to talk about DeSantis because the super PAC supporting his campaign announced layoffs after his disappointing run in Iowa. The primary obviously has not happened in New Hampshire yet, but DeSantis is headed back to Florida. President Biden, at the time, candidate Biden, kind of did a similar move after he had a low or poor performance in Iowa, where he sort of skipped out on New Hampshire to focus on South Carolina. What is DeSantis doing here? Is it a repeat of that? Is he just sort of walking away from some of the early states?
It's an acknowledgement that this was not going to be a good state for him and that he was going to have a very hard time being competitive here. We've seen that in poll after poll with Donald Trump around 50%, Nikki Haley somewhere in the 30s, and Ron DeSantis in single digits. So I think his campaign recognized they didn't want to throw good money after bad here and try to fight what would be a losing battle. The difference between what he is trying to do and what Joe Biden was trying to do is Biden knew that he had the base of the Democratic Party and black voters waiting to support him in South Carolina. DeSantis is only going to have more of the same struggles in South Carolina that he had in Iowa, but at least it's slightly friendlier terrain. As for the super PAC, I'm not seeing a more disappointing performance by a well-funded organization since my Cowboys got blown out of the playoffs last weekend. The DeSantis super PAC has just not really been able to live up to the hype that was supposed to keep him in this race even when the regular campaign struggled. We're seeing that in their retrenchment now as they move to South Carolina too. They've only shrank their ambitions really since about 6 months ago, Ellison. It's only gone one way for them.
Yeah, before we let you go, I do want to ask you about this poll, because there's a new study by the University of New Hampshire that found that about a fifth of potential voters in next week's primary either were not old enough to vote in 2020 or just didn't live in the state. Over the last 4 years, New Hampshire gained 245,000 potential new voters, while 208,000 longtime residents either left the state or passed away. It's not a major increase in potential voters, but the authors say all of these new faces could actually add some volatility into next week's primary. What are you hearing from voters 6 days out? And have you heard anything this cycle that has surprised you or been different from other times you spent campaigns in New Hampshire talking to voters?
Yeah, look, I mean, those numbers are interesting. It's sort of part of the reshuffling around the country that we saw after COVID, with people voting with their feet or moving different places where they could work remotely and so forth. The electorate shifting here in New Hampshire, like it always does. One of the hardest things about polling in New Hampshire is to figure out who's going to show up, because so many people here are unaffiliated. They're not part of a traditional political party. That's been the case here in New Hampshire this cycle, too. And I'd say the one thing that I'm finding is a lot of those people are having a hard time deciding exactly, which direction they want this country to go. I talked to one woman today who was a Nikki Haley supporter. She was definitely going to vote for Haley, but I asked her, if Haley's not the nominee, are you with Donald Trump or are you with Joe Biden? And she was really torn on that, despite having been a Trump supporter in the past. And so the people who kind of fall into that gap where they're not exactly sure whether they are with Biden or with Haley, whether they're with the Democrats or the Republicans in this primary altogether, that's kind of the biggest open question group in this primary, Ellison.
All right, Garrett Hake, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Things got heated at day 2 of E. Jean Carroll's defamation trial against Donald Trump. As Carroll took the witness stand, Trump, according to one of Carroll's attorneys, was loudly reacting, saying things like witch hunt and con job, all within earshot of the jury. According to our reporter in the courtroom, the judge seemed to lose patience and said, "Mr. Trump, I hope I don't have to consider excluding you from the trial." Trump said he would love that, to which the judge replied, "I know you would, because you just can't control yourself in this circumstance. You just can't." Later in the afternoon, Trump took to Truth Social to say he did nothing wrong and that, quote, the judge suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos for more on this. Danny, I have been wondering all day, what did you make of this back and forth?
Donald Trump knows that he can push the limits with judges, both federal and state judges, because nobody wants to play chicken with the former president, and that game of chicken is the game of contempt. You don't want to. Finding him is one thing. Maybe you order him to stay away in a civil case. You can't really do that in a criminal case. But ultimately, you don't want to be a judge that has to actually order a U.S. Marshal or a court officer to lay hands on the former president. Donald Trump knows that. Donald Trump knows these judges don't want to have to deal with him in that way. So he's pushing the limits, and he knows how to do it. He's not necessarily shouting out in court, but he's doing it to the side, under his breath. hitting the table with his hands. But really, he's, with any other party, I would say you're playing with fire. But Donald Trump seems to know just how far he can take it without getting in real trouble with the court. Not financial trouble. He doesn't seem to worry about fines or other penalties. But I don't think any judge really wants to send him downstairs or in the sidewall or wherever the holding cell is. And he seems to know that. Trump does.
Okay, so Danny, beyond that back and forth exchange, the drama, if you will, what else did we hear today at this trial? And what do you make of E. Jean Carroll's testimony so far?
The plaintiff's counsel did a very good job of calling E. Jean Carroll and humanizing her first with her biography, with her background, her rise from the country of Indiana to the city life here, and her very impressive jobs, her very impressive resume, and then they veered into all the terrible things that she says has happened to her or have happened to her since Donald Trump made her an enemy. And one of the things that's really interesting about this case is that it's only about damages. And part of the measure of damages is what someone like Donald Trump can do, as opposed to just what any other person issuing defamatory statements might do sitting in their mother's basement on the internet. They simply don't have the same power as the former president. When he insults someone, there's a legion of people, apparently, that take up the cause and jump online and as we saw today in today's testimony, according to E. Jean Carroll, verbally assault her online and otherwise and make life pretty miserable. So it's interesting that the measure of damages is actually commensurate with the level of power of the former president. I don't mean even as the president, I mean his social influence as power.
Danny Savalos, thank you. We appreciate it. Don't go anywhere because we are just getting started. We're learning new details tonight about a police raid that sent a toddler to the hospital, plus an incredible heroic rescue in Vermont. An 8-year-old girl is now safe after falling into an icy cold lake. And Princess Kate won't be at any public events until after Easter following surgery. And King Charles is dealing with medical issues of his own. That's all just ahead, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. President Biden today met with key congressional leaders at the White House to discuss national security funding. They discussed funding for Israel and Ukraine and the U.S.'s southern border. Congress has to pass a short-term funding bill this week before money runs out Friday night. Also in Washington, President Biden has a new proposal that could mean you'll see overdraft fees dropped to as little as $3. It's part of the administration's effort to combat fees they say are a burden to consumers. The proposed change would only allow banks to charge customers what it would cost them to break even on providing an overdraft. The banking industry is expected to fight the new regulation. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had a bit of a plane swap in Zurich, Switzerland today. His original plane was grounded because of an oxygen leak. Blinken was in Davos at the World Economic Forum. The interruption did not impact any of his meetings, and a new aircraft was arranged for him to head back to the United States. A new study has found that colon cancer is killing more young people than ever before. The findings were released today in a cancer journal for clinicians. It also found colon cancer is the deadliest cancer for men under the age of 50. And wrestler Hulk Hogan helped rescue a teenage girl from a car crash in Florida. It all happened over the weekend. Hogan reportedly used a ballpoint pen to puncture a car's airbag. The girl was trapped in an overturned vehicle. Tampa police say there were only minor injuries in the crash. Audio recorded during a police raid that left a baby injured in Ohio is raising new questions about whether police may have targeted the wrong home. Courtney Price says her toddler was hospitalized after a SWAT team broke down her front door and deployed flashbangs. Audio from her Ring camera shared exclusively with NBC News captured someone acknowledging they had the wrong address, but it's unclear who that person was.
It's Wallen. It's a Wallen house.
The police are denying Price's account, and the local mayor is now demanding an investigation. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has more.
Ellison, according to police reports and documents that were released by the city of Elyria, this all had to do with a police investigation into stolen firearms, and that is why police say they were at that particular home looking for a suspect. Body camera footage shows several tactical officers outside the home in tactical gear. They bang on the door and announce that they have a search warrant. And about 6 seconds after that first knock, officers set off flashbangs outside the house. That shatters a window, and they bust open the door. Listen to audio of that moment. Take a listen.
Police search warrant, come to the door! Police search warrant, come to the door! Dogs, dogs, dogs. Police search warrant! Coming down the stairs! You're good, man. Come here, put your hands up. Okay.
After the door is open, you eventually see Courtney Price come to the door with her arms over her head. She is the mother of the baby, and she is telling police that her child is on a ventilator. Now, police say they believe they were at the right home looking for that suspect, but Price says the person that they were looking for hasn't lived there in more than a year. She says her aunt and uncle live there now, and she recently moved to Ohio to stay with them while her baby waits for heart surgery. She says her baby was born prematurely. He has an issue with his lungs as well as a hole in his heart, so that is the surgery that he was waiting for. Police say that they did use 2 flashbangs in this case. That's according to a statement they released, but they say those flashbangs did not have any chemical component, and in a statement they say any allegation suggesting the child was exposed to chemical agents is not true. NBC News also obtained some doorbell camera footage from Courtney Price. She says you can hear someone saying that they have the wrong house. That was about 45 minutes after the initial incident. It's unclear who says that at this point. We don't know if it was police or a neighbor. It really is unclear. Police have not commented on that portion of video. The mayor, of course, now calling for a full-scale investigation. Ellison?
Valerie Castro, thank you. In Vermont, an 8-year-old is safe and sound after falling through ice. You're looking at the dramatic body camera footage of her rescue from a Vermont state trooper. She and several siblings were playing on the surface of a frozen pond on private property when 2 of them fell through. The 80-year-old homeowner was able to pull a 6-year-old girl to safety. The 8-year-old was out of reach, but thankfully, State Trooper Michelle Archer was nearby, arrived on scene in less than 5 minutes, and then jumped in the pond to save her. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo. Stephen, when you look at that video, it makes your heart race. It is dramatic. It's scary. It's all of the things. But miraculously, that video, that body camera that was worn by a state trooper, she did everything right and saved this little girl. I understand you were able to actually speak to that state trooper. How is she doing? How is this little girl doing?
Yeah, Ellison, it's just incredible to actually hear what was going through Trooper Michelle Archer's mind as this all unfolded. She says she wasn't even thinking at the time, that it was either instinct or training or some combination of the two. But she, as you see, just dives right into that water. She says, thankfully, the little girl, she knew she was wearing pink, so she was able to find her through that sort of murky water and get her to safety. Another trooper was there as well and was able to help get the little girl to an ambulance, of course, because Trooper Archer was stunned from the cold herself whenever she came out of the water. When they actually got the call, they were told by dispatch that it was for a child who had been reported deceased in that pond. So listen to the moment that she says she realized that the little girl was alive.
The first sigh of relief came when I pulled her out of the water and I heard those kind of audible noises. Because at that point, I wasn't sure if she was still breathing or not.
Now, Archer says that some calls for service for police officers, troopers, they leave them changed. And she says this is certainly one of those. As for that girl, she is actually back home now. She's going to be okay. When she was first taken to the hospital, they thought she was going to have possibly some long-term injuries. No, Ellison, she is just fine tonight.
Wow, an amazing story. Stephen, any advice that the trooper gave or just from other organizations For people who maybe live in an area where they could be near some sort of body of frozen water, what should people know about staying safe?
Yeah, this was some important information, too. I grew up in Texas. I know you grew up in Georgia. Not something that I knew about. So this information was helpful. Areas with moving water have thinner ice, snow-covered ice, often thinner as well. If you see rocks, logs, that type of thing in the ice, it means that it's most likely weaker. And shady areas also have thinner ice. But even with these tips that we were able to find, the troopers from Vermont, they say it's never really worth it, especially to let kids play on the ice. They say the risk is just too high and the reward just too low. So their advice is just to keep off the ice. Allison?
All right, Stephen Romo, thank you. We appreciate it. Coming up, some big news out of Buckingham Palace. Princess Kate will be in the hospital for 2 weeks after having surgery, and King Charles needs treatment as well. We have all of the details, but first, you gotta see this. A monkey in Indonesia took a pretty valuable item from a tourist. It stole a woman's passport and even started to shred it right in front of her. It happened at the Ubud Monkey Forest, which is over in Bali. When the tourist tried to grab back her passport, take it back, another monkey lashed out at her. And now she might have a little trouble getting back home. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Russian President Vladimir Putin is gathering signatures for his re-election campaign. Russian law says he needs 300,000 supporters from at least 40 different regions to get on the ballot. Putin's campaign says he already has more than 2 million signatures. The election is in March. Remember, back in 2021, Putin signed a bill that would allow him to seek 2 additional 6-year terms as president, meaning he could remain in power until 2036. A historic public sector workers' strike is set for tomorrow in Northern Ireland. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but we're talking about teachers, nurses, bus drivers, you name it. Tens of thousands of workers from 16 unions are scheduled to take part in the walkout. The main issue seems to be money or lack thereof. The unions there say they've been dealing with long-running pay disputes, and they're demanding pay raises that are appropriate and go with their counterparts elsewhere in the UK. China saw one of its slowest economic growth rates in decades last year. So what gives for the world's second largest economy? You can chalk some of it up to a housing crisis, an aging workforce, and high debt. Analysts say this points to a challenge for China's President Xi Jinping to engineer a stronger economic recovery. And fossils dating back some 565 million years ago have been discovered in Wales. Researchers say the fossils represent some of the world's oldest complex life forms, and that some of the creatures are similar to the modern-day jellyfish. Scientists say others are more, quote, bizarre and unfamiliar. And we have some breaking news tonight in Ecuador. A prosecutor who was investigating an armed assault on live television was shot to death today. Ecuador's attorney general said the prosecutor, Cesar Schwartz, was shot while driving in the city of Guayaquil. That is the same city as the television station attack. Last Thursday, 13 alleged gunmen stormed the state-owned television station and inspired terror before police arrived about 30 minutes later. In a video statement on social media, the attorney general said, quote, "I will say this emphatically. Organized crime groups, criminals, terrorists, will not stop our commitment to the Ecuadorian society." In Kenya, a doomsday cult leader is accused of luring hundreds of people, including children, to their death under the promise of eternal life. Prosecutors say it was an elaborate crime, preying on people's fear of the world ending. Now the cult leader and his followers could face life in prison or even the death penalty.
All accused persons do undergo psychiatric assessment to ascertain their fitness to take plea.
Dozens of accused doomsday cult members in Kenya appearing in court on Wednesday, facing charges of murder, cruelty, and child torture.
This is not a normal case. Isn't it crimes against humanity?
It is the start of a legal process in an investigation centered on the cult's leader, a self-described pastor named Paul McKenzie. Prosecutors say McKenzie's so-called Good News International Church was anything but.
I am afraid that we have many more graves in this forest.
In April of 2023, investigators discovered a horrific scene in Kenya's remote Shakahola forest. Hundreds of bodies unearthed from shallow graves. Among the dead, nearly 200 children, with autopsies finding that some died from starvation, while others were strangled or suffocated. Those who did survive were found in critical condition.
We were able to rescue about 15 people. And among the 15 people, 4 died as we were proceeding to hospital.
But this was a highly organized crime.
Now prosecutors point to McKenzie as the central figure in their investigation. They say he convinced his followers to abandon their lives and retreat to the forest under the pretense of preparing for the apocalypse, then letting them starve to death as a path to religious salvation. McKenzie's defense says he is cooperating with the investigation and denies the allegations against him.
Terrorists use religion to advance their heinous acts. People like Mr. Mackenzie are using religion to do exactly the same thing.
The government of Kenya will do whatever it takes to make sure that we convict Mr. Mackenzie and all those who helped him perpetrate his heinous crimes.
And a judge in Kenya ordered mental evaluations for the cult leader, Paul Mackenzie, as well as dozens of his followers before they can be formally charged with the murders of 191 children. Intense back and forth in the Red Sea is going on as we speak. Just hours ago, the U.S. struck anti-ballistic missile site in Yemen, a number of those sites. And earlier today, Houthis attacked an American ship in the Gulf of Aden. The fighting comes as the Biden administration officially designates the Yemen-based Houthi militants as a terrorist organization. Back in 2021, Biden revoked the group's status as a foreign terrorist organization out of concern that it was adding to Yemen's complex humanitarian crisis. The Houthi rebels are now specifically designated global terrorist, which isn't as severe as their previous designation. Today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken made it clear that, quote, the Houthis must be held accountable for their actions, but it should not be at the expense of civilians in Yemen, adding that the State Department is working towards mitigating any effects the designation could have on civilians before the designation officially goes into place in 30 days. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more.
The crisis in the Red Sea continues to escalate. A short while ago, the Houthi militia, which controls large parts of Yemen, which has already been targeted by the U.S. military on at least 3 occasions, said that it carried out another attack on an American vessel. No confirmation of that strike. In the statement from the Yemeni military, that's how the Houthis describe themselves, they said that they fully expect there to be another American retaliation, but that they will not be deterred. They have already been designated just today as an official terrorist organization, and that comes with consequences, making it more difficult for international humanitarian organizations to operate inside Yemen, making it more difficult for Houthi officials to travel, engage in any kind of international finance. Earlier, I spoke with one of the very top Houthi leaders, and he said that despite the terrorist designation, they had been on the U.S. terrorist list, then taken off of it, and now put back onto it again. They said that they will continue to carry out attacks in the Red Sea. They said that they are targeting vessels that are bound for Israel or assisting Israel in its war against Hamas in Gaza, but that other ships are free to transit through the Red Sea and will not be targeted at all. That is something that is disputed by the Biden administration.
Richard Engel, thank you so much. Let's bring in next Jamil Jaffers, who is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just start sort of big picture. We touched on the fact that this designation is different than the one that the Houthi rebels had from the United States in the past. What does this terrorist designation mean in a practical sense?
Yeah, look, essentially there are 2 types of designations. There are more, but the 2 types we're talking about here are the specially designated terrorist group. That's what we've now named the Houthis, and the foreign terrorist organization designation. They were previously designated by the Trump administration, both of those things, and then the Biden administration withdrew both of those designations early on in its time in office. Now they've added that first one back on. Essentially what that means is their financial transactions are blocked now as a specially designated global terrorist, but you can still provide them with certain things, including what would be barred under the Foreign Terrorist Organization designation, and that would be material support. The U.S. government's also granted a bunch of licenses allowing the provision of email services, financial transactions, and the like of a certain limited variety to the Houthis in an effort to address the potential humanitarian concerns that some groups have raised.
So weakening Houthis financing their capabilities, it's a pretty complex thing, right? I mean, not only because they are backed by funds coming from Iran, but because the movement of weapons in the Middle East can be difficult to track. And when we're talking about that, we're also talking about the movement of weapons in the area from the United States, right? Is there any chance that the U.S., this designation, that it could have some sort of reverse impact or some sort of thing they didn't expect where something goes wrong here?
Well, we've had a lot of experience in using both the specially designated global terrorist designation and the FTO designation. We've been using the FTO designation since the 90s. Hamas, Hezbollah were some of the early groups that were designated under that authority and have remained that way for now almost 24 years. So this is not unusual for us to use these type of designations. What is different here about the situation is that you're right about the supply of weapons coming in from Iran and Iran support. And at the end of the day, what it's really going to take to get the Houthis to stop doing what they're doing is for Iran to pay the price. And they've not been feeling the price. To the contrary, U.S. shipping, global shipping has paid the price. And we just saw potentially 2 U.S. Navy SEALs who are now still missing, whose lives may have been lost in the effort to interdict Iranian weapons going to these very Houthi rebels.
So, Jamil, what is the impact of a designation like this on civilians in Yemen? I mean, Yemen is a country that has been at war for years and years. It is arguably the worst humanitarian crisis in the world right now. What will this mean for the people who live there, the most vulnerable civilians who are already struggling to get access to basic things like food?
Well, the Houthis control a significant chunk of territory in Yemen. They're on sort of the west coast of Yemen, the coast that borders the Red Sea, including the capital. Government controls other parts of Yemen, but that significantly populated part of Yemen is controlled by the Houthis. And so this designation should, in fact, have an impact on the finances of the Houthis themselves, less of an impact on the Yemeni people there. And of course, the government can always create exceptions to any of these designations it makes. It's already done so with these 5 licenses. So we'll see how this plays out. At the end of the day, though, designations and financial sanctions are one thing. Limited strikes against them are another. Strikes that really respond to make the Iranian backers of Houthis feel the price and feel the penalty for this is really what it will take to get the Houthis to stop doing. So at the end of the day, they're just a proxy, a cat's paw for the Iranian forces, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's Quds Force.
Jamil Jaffer, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and insight. Tonight, the Princess of Wales is in the hospital, recovering from what Kensington Palace says was a successful abdominal surgery. This as her father-in-law, King Charles, is having a procedure of his own. Laura Bundock from our partners at Sky News has more.
This is the last time we saw both the King and Kate as the royal family reunited at Sandringham on Christmas Day. No official duties for either since, and now perhaps news why. The Princess of Wales recovering here in hospital after an abdominal operation, and she'll stay for up to a fortnight.
The palace have said that it's not related to cancer, which obviously is a relief. But to have to stay in hospital for 2 weeks when you're someone like the Princess of Wales, where you could have round-the-clock nursing at home and everything you might need, clearly indicates that this has been major surgery.
Kate's last official engagement was her annual carol service at Westminster Abbey. We don't know the details, but news of her operation came as a shock. In a statement, Kensington Palace confirmed Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales was admitted to the London clinic yesterday for planned abdominal surgery. The surgery was successful, and it's expected that she will remain in hospital for 10 to 14 days before returning home to continue her recovery. Based on the current medical advice, she's unlikely to return to public duties until after Easter. Prince William on duty last week won't be working while Kate recovers. His diary cleared to be at her bedside and also support their 3 children. The royal family rarely comments on health issues, but within an hour and a half of the Wales's news came a statement from Buckingham Palace about the King, who is, we're told, undergoing treatment for an enlarged prostate. His Majesty's condition is benign and he'll attend hospital next week for a corrective procedure. The King's public engagements will be postponed for a short period of recuperation.
With me now is royal commentator Hilary Fordwich. So, Hilary, 3 of the most senior royals are now out of action, if you will. How unusual is this?
Well, you're absolutely right, Alison. It's really unusual. Actually, it sets a historic precedent. And what is very important about this is that they're also councillors of state, or at least Prince William is. And he's obviously no longer undertaking official duties while he stays by his wife's side. But of course, the King is going to be not attending proper duties or official duties while he's undergoing his surgery. The councillors of state, after the Queen Camilla, there are 4 others. Prince William, so he's now out of it. And also then Prince Andrew's one of them. We know he's not undertaking any other official duties. And also Beatrice, but also Prince Harry. They're the next 4 after Queen Camilla who are over the age of 21. Obviously, we have 2 other people that have been assigned as councillors of state, and that is the Princess Royal and the Duke of Edinburgh. But it does bring into question the importance of those that have to step up when needed.
So, Hilary, when you look at the fact that the royal family has come out and said this is what people are dealing with, this is what the princess is dealing with, this is what the king is dealing with, it is not normal to hear details about medical conditions, right? But the palace is saying that for King Charles, he felt it was important to talk about his condition. Is the royal family trying to set some sort of new precedent moving forward for the royal family when it comes to public health disclosures?
Yes, absolutely. And you've already had actually urologists coming out and saying in the UK that they really admire his forthright declaration of what exactly this is, because this procedure, 1 in 3 men over 50 have issues to do with their prostate, and it's viewed as something that is very preventable in terms of early detection. So the King has actually stated that if this just helps 1 other man have something detected, then he's glad that he came public. So he is aiming to set a new precedent. This is historic.
Hilary Fordwich, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Still to come, California is looking to ban tackle football for young kids, but the measure just got sacked. We'll explain why, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following. Today marks 30 years since the 1994 Northridge earthquake shook Southern California. Residents woke up in the early hours to the 6.7 magnitude quake. It killed 60 people, injured more than 9,000, and caused billions of dollars in property damage and economic losses. The earthquake, however, did revolutionize the way we study these tremors and how we prepare and respond. California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would have banned youth tackle football across the state, vowing to make the sport safer for kids instead. The proposed bill would have banned kids under 12 from participating, but Newsom placed responsibility on parents to decide whether their kids should or should not play. Pedestrians stopping to snap a photo on the Las Vegas Strip might want to think twice. A new ordinance prohibits standing or stopping on pedestrian bridges, including up to 20 feet near areas surrounded by stairs, elevators, and escalators. Violators could face up to 6 months in jail or a hefty $1,000 fine. County officials say the move is to increase public safety by improving pedestrian traffic. Now to an NBC News exclusive. Our Tom Yam is sitting down with 2 of the 3 Palestinian-American students who were shot in Burlington, Vermont last November. For the first time, they're speaking out about that ambush that left one of them paralyzed.
I just remember gunshots and falling down.
For the first time, Hishem Awartani, the Palestinian-American college student who was shot and paralyzed, is telling his story. How he and his 2 friends were ambushed on a November night in Burlington, Vermont, he says, because of racism.
Growing up in Palestine, This was something that I'd always thought was possible.
But did you think it happened here?
Not really, no. I definitely expected it would happen to me in like the West Bank in Palestine, but not in Vermont.
Hishem and his two best friends, Kinan Abdelhamid and Tassin Ahmed, all grew up together in the West Bank, doing everything together, including going to college in the U.S. With the war raging, the friends decided to stay with Hishem's family in Burlington during the Thanksgiving break.
Hishem's uncle was driving us from bowling alley, and before we went into the house, we decided to walk around the block. That's what we usually do.
Tahsin and I were both wearing the kufiya, like the traditional Palestinian headscarf, for a variety of reasons. Practically, because it was really cold, but on a more meaningful sense, it's because that we felt as Palestinians during this time period, it's important for us to show our identity and to show that we exist and that we're human. Just walking along the street, this man comes down the porch, approaches us, pulls out a pistol.
Tahsin was screaming when he was shot first. Hishem didn't make a sound, was running. As soon as Tahsin started screaming, I was running.
Did you know you were shot?
I didn't quite process the fact until I looked at my phone and I saw my phone had blood on it. I was like, oh, I'd been shot.
All units be advised the shooter's unaccounted for.
The next day, federal agents arrested 48-year-old Jason Eaton, who lived steps from the shooting and had an arsenal of weapons in his apartment. He allegedly told the authorities who arrested him, "I've been waiting for you." Eaton has pleaded not guilty to attempted murder charges.
Why do you think he shot you?
Systematic dehumanization. People would like to focus on him as an individual. Oh, he's just this one evil guy. But the truth is, he's a symptom of a larger issue.
The bullet that hit Hishem struck his spine. Now paralyzed, he's learning how to navigate his new life.
When they told you what your future may look like, or at least what the immediate future would look like, what was that moment like?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely something that's hard, but I take solace in the fact that I'm able to receive this care. It makes me think of other people in Gaza who, have been disabled by bombings and they are not able to receive that. I know that my life will continue, but I don't know about theirs.
Tom Yamas, NBC News, Boston.
Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. A crew of astronauts were supposed to be launched into space today, but it's now being pushed back. We'll explain why right after this. Welcome back. Time now for the future of everything. This afternoon, there were just a few hours left on the countdown clock until the launch of the first all-European mission to the International Space Station. But then it stopped. In a post on X, SpaceX, who both share the same owner, Elon Musk, announced that the launch of the Axiom 3 mission has been pushed back a day and will lift off early tomorrow evening. The delay will reportedly allow more time for pre-launch checkouts and data analysis. The AX-3 mission will carry 4 people and spend around 2 weeks aboard the ISS conducting more than 30 science experiments. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra has more on the updated launch.
Hey, well, the launch that was supposed to be 2024's first crewed launch has been scrubbed for today because Axiom, the company behind it, says they want more time to do data analysis. They want more time to look at things like the parachute system. And for anyone who follows the space world, you know it is extremely common to have delayed and scrubbed launches, usually due to things like weather. But whenever this launch does happen, it will be Turkey's first time sending an astronaut. That astronaut has said how proud and honored he is to represent his country. But there's also a couple of really interesting experiments happening with this launch. They're looking at the effects of microgravity on things like tumor, and that's going to help them understand how cancer can be detected and prevented in space, but also even the effects of microgravity on food taste. And remember, big picture, Axiom wants to build a commercial space station eventually. So these experiments are really helping everyone understand, everyone in the science world and the space world understand how humans can one day live and spend time in space long term. Now, big picture, remember, this has been a busy week in the space world. It was just announced that Artemis's mission to the moon, which is arguably going to be the biggest launch of our lifetime, that has been delayed. It was initially supposed to be end of this year. Everyone knew it was going to be delayed. No one expected that to really stay on track. So now that is tracking towards the end of 2025, at least for now.
Marissa Parra, thank you. That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We will see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.